All right, thank you. One of the repeated and stressed themes in 1 Timothy is the tight connection between belief and behavior, or teaching and practice. Sound or health teaching leads to godliness, while false teaching is unproductive at best and damning at worst. From the onset of the letter, Paul charges Timothy to instruct certain people not to teach my different doctrine. In 1 Timothy 1 verses 3, because this different doctrine, along with myths and genealogies, does not promote the divine training that is known by faith, as it is in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 4. Paul is speaking of the importance of sound doctrine in the church, but his words apply just as well to the workplace. W. Edwards Deming, one of the founders of continuous quality improvement, called his methods a system of profound knowledge. He said, once the individual understands the system of profound knowledge, he will apply its principles in every kind of relationship with other people. He will have a basis for judgment of his own decisions and for transformation of the organizations that he belongs to. Knowledge of the deepest truth is essential in Timothy Johnson has translated 1 Timothy chapter 1 verses 4 more transparently as God's way of ordering reality as it is apprehendedly by faith. The church is or should be ordered according to God's way. Few would dispute, but the organizations also be ordered according to God's way. The first century Greco-Roman world believed that society should be ordered according to nature. Thus, if nature is the creation of God, then God's way of ordering creation should be reflected in the way society is ordered as well. As Johnson observes, there is no radical discontinuity between the will of God and the structures of society. The structures of the oikos and the ecclesia, the church, not but about the dispensation, in bracket, administration of God in the world. Workplaces, households, and churches will reflect on the ordering of creation. Please scroll up, Terry. Thank you. A true understanding of God's ways is essential in all workplaces. For example, a prominent theme in creation is that human beings are created good. Later, we fell into sin and our sin that came to redeem us. Workers are therefore human beings who sin, yet who may experience redemption and become good as God always intended. The truth about goodness, sin, and redemption needs to be factored into organizational practices. Neither churches nor workplaces can function properly if they assume that people are good only and not sinners. Accounts need to be audited and harassment needs to be stopped. Customer service needs to be rewarded. Priests and pastors, employees and executives need to be supervised. Similarly, neither churches nor workplaces can assume that people who err or sin should be discarded automatically. The offer of redemption and the practical help to make the transformation needs to be made. In churches, the focus is on spiritual and eternal redemption. Non-church workplaces are focused on a more limited redemption related to the mission of the organization. Probation, performance improvement plans, retraining, reassignment to a different position, mentoring, and employee assistance programs, as opposed to immediate firing, are examples of redemptive practices in certain places, especially in the West. The particulars of what is actually redemptive will vary considerably, of course, depending on the type of institution, the surrounding cultural, legal, and economic environment, and other factors. If Christians in the marketplace are to understand how God would have them and those around them act, as it is in 1 Timothy 3, verse 15, they must understand God's revelation in the Bible and believe in it. Truth leads to love, as it is in 1 Timothy 1:5, while false doctrine promotes speculation. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 4. Controversy in 1 Timothy 6, verses 4, and spiritual distraction in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 19. Knowledge of God's ways as revealed in his word cannot be the domain of Bible scholars alone. Understanding relevant only within the church. Christian workers must also be biblically informed so that they can operate in the world according to God's will and for his glory. All Christians have a leadership role, regardless of their place in the organization. Executives usually have the greatest opportunity to shape the strategy and structure of an organization. All workers have continual opportunities to develop good relationships, produce excellent products and services, act with integrity, help others develop their abilities, and shape the culture of their immediate work groups. Everyone has a sphere of influence at work. Can you scroll up, or should I read the ethics branding? Paul advised Timothy not to let his perceived lack of status prevent him from trying to make a difference. Let no one despise your youth, but set the believers as an example in speech and conduct, in love, in faith, in purity, as it is in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. It is interesting to note that some of this reality is already perceived in contemporary workplaces. Many organizations have mission statements and core values. These words mean roughly the same thing to secular organizations as beliefs or doctrine mean to churches. Organizations like churches pay close attention to culture. This is further evidence that what workers believe or what an organization teaches affects how people behave. Christians in the workplace should be at the forefront of shaping the values, mission, and culture of the organization in which we participate to the degree we are able.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for that very eloquent reading. Now, those last words, the last sentence of the reading, Christians in the workplace should be at the forefront of shaping the values, the mission, and the culture of organizations in which we participate to the degree that we are able. Those words are very critical, and they are the best summary of that reading. Now, this reading that Chris has taken us through, it begins off by indicating that God is a God of order, and God orders nature through our actions, through the actions of believers. As we are going to see in today's class, this evening's class, our individual differences can be God's way of intervening in organizations. Remember, each one of us created in the image and likeness of God. We carry those differences, individual behaviors, the diversities we have as part of bringing color to the organizations we belong to. We may be teachers in schools. We may be co-workers in banking industries. We could be working in various NGOs, various organizations. Some of us here could be CEOs or placed in some form of leadership capacity or managerial capacity. This reading that Chris has taken us through challenges us in some of his sentences. What do we do with the weaknesses that are occasioned by individual differences? How do we correct one another? How do we take advantage of those weaknesses we find in our colleagues at the workplace? In other words, the first words I mentioned, God is a God of order, and God orders nature through our actions. Meaning, if there is any shortfall in the organizations we belong to, God intervenes in these organizations through our actions, through our behaviors. Some reading I went through some times back indicated that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, having been crucified, died and buried, and later resurrected, he acquires spiritual body, meaning if he has hands, then he has spiritual hands. If he has eyes, he has spiritual eyes. If he has legs, he has spiritual legs. But our organizations don't require the spiritual legs, the spiritual eyes, the spiritual hands. Our organizations require physical hands, requires physical eyes. God awaits upon us. He uses our hands to touch our organizations because without them, then he cannot be able to touch organizations. Somebody would like to see that weakness within our organization, would like God to see it and to intervene and correct it. But what we are understanding this evening ahead of our class is that our organization sometimes could be as weak as the human individuals within those organizations. Even those organizations be Christian organizations, faith-based organizations. Sometimes there is not much God can do without our hands, because the organizational change that we require to intervene in individual differences, in individual behavior, must be physical interventions. It requires our hands, it requires our eyes, it requires our legs to move around and intervene in organizations. That is why we say in that last sentence, Christians in the workplace should be at the forefront of shaping the values, the mission, and the culture of the organizations in which we participate to the degree that we are able. I invite a maximum of 2 or 3 rejoinders to this reflection before we can begin. Any hand? Any hand? Yes, Caroline.
Thank you, Daktari, and good evening.
Good evening to you.
Personally, I am so very challenged by this article, and I want to believe that it is speaking mostly to us. But I want to agree with you, Daktari, that as Christians in the workplace, we should shape culture of the organization and more so to Christ-likeness. But what happens when the system is much weightier than you can as a Christian? Yes, you will still remain a Christian, try and have the values that exemplify the Christ-likeness in you, but then it becomes a challenge where a system is so rigid for it to change. I don't know whether it gets to a point where some of us would make prayers like, God, just export me to a different work environment because this is too much. So what happens when it gets to that point, you as a Christian, and you feel like this is way too much and you have no option? And in that case, yes, you are a leader in that organization and you need to exemplify Christ himself in that organization. What is your assignment as a Christian at that point?
Thank you very much, Caroline, for those words of encouragement. Any other one or two? Any other one or two? All right, if there is any other. Yes, did I see any hand? Who is speaking?
My apologies, Paul Amata.
Yes, Paul.
Thank you for this article. It's really enriching. Mine is simple. I just want to say that what I've picked is that as Christians or leaders in organizations or in different capacities, I think talking about the spiritual God or Jesus and the physical us, what I've picked is that as we partake or undertake several roles that we have, several challenges, several duties, ours is simple, just, okay, as we try to rely on God for spiritual intervention, as human beings, we also need to put in the spiritual, the physical effort, not just to pray, but also act as we pray upon God to intervene spiritually. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Amata, for those encouraging words. Juliana, you like to say something?
Yes, please, Dr. Ali. Thank you for the opportunity. So
Yes.
mine, what stands out for me in the reading is that every one of us has a sphere of influence. So wherever we are, there could be something, a particular place, a reason as to why God maybe has put us in that workplace. And then maybe just to respond to what Kara said, we may need to really stand our ground. What reminds me from the scriptures, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When they were told to bow to the God of that land, they did not. So, like, wherever you're placed, it's for you to stand up to stand your ground, no matter what comes your way. Because once you stand, when they see your God, then they'll be able to respect, the story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego and Daniel. So the king ended up, bowing down to the God of Daniel because Daniel did not bow to the other God. That's my.
Thank you very
That's
much.
all.
Thank you very much, Julian. We pray. Lord God, we come before you this evening. We are conscious of our innumerable weaknesses. We are conscious of how weak we are. Yet we are conscious again that we are the creatures you've created and placed in various human organizations. You place us there because we are human, and only through our humanness you can intervene. Therefore, we ask you to send each one of us the gift of your Holy Spirit, that in whatever we do, whatever we say, in whichever manner we act, your will and glory may be found. Also help us to bear with the weaknesses that are occasioned by the individual differences of all the people we work with. Help us to see these individual differences as your way of adding color into the universe. Penetrate our thoughts, penetrate our actions as we sit and listen to you in this evening classroom. What we learn may translate us to become true salt into the world. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you very much. Now I share a screen here. Right. There we are. Right, so dear students, we are gathered again this evening, and we are on topic number 4. Topic number 4 brings us into confrontation with what we call individual behavior in organizations, individual differences, individual diversities. This evening discussion is supposed to help us see the place of individual behavior, be able to see the place of individual differences, the place of individual diversities in trying to add value to organizational behavior. The summary of our discussion this evening can be put down in about 8 items. 1, this evening we seek to define what individual differences and individual behavior are in the context of organizational behavior. We also seek to explore the foundations of individual behavior. Thirdly, we will look at various models of individual behavior. Fourth, we will consider how organizational management can satisfy the expectations of the individual employees through what we call psychological contract as fulfilled in what is referred to as person-job fitness. Number 5, we look at the nature and the causes of individual differences. Under that, we'll be able to look at psychological differences. We look at physical differences. Then we'll proceed on having looked at what individual behavior, individual differences are. We will try to dig deep to try and understand some of the things that occasion individual differences by reflecting on what we refer to as occupational personality.
Mwalimu,
So
are you
we'll
sharing
finish.
the screen? Because I can't
Pardon?
see. Are you
Pardon?
sharing the screen? I can't see.
Oh, the screen is not shared.
No.
Oh, sorry for that. Sorry. Just give me a moment. Oh my. Just a moment. Oh.
Doc, do we have anyone recording the class?
I may not be sure. Could somebody record, please?
It's being recorded on YouTube.
All right.
It's on YouTube.
All right. So because of, I thought I had shared the screen. Sorry for that. I just discovered I had not shared the screen. So we said that we are looking at this evening the concept of individual behavior, individual differences within the organization. And I had just begun to, as it were, sum up the highlights of this discussion. And I don't know how Waruku realized I was not sharing the screen. Waruku, how did you discover that? I'm sure you saw there was no screen.
Organized in presentation. I just assumed that you're relying on some notes. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. But if you never stopped me, I would not have realized I had not shared. So once more again, I'm saying that I had just been presenting the summary of this discussion. And it was that we will look at what individual differences and individual behavior are. We'll be able to look at the foundations of individual behavior. And then we'll look thirdly at various models of individual behavior. We look at various models. And then number 4, I explained that we will try to see the link between what the worker, the employee expects of the organization that is signaled in what we refer to as the psychological contract, and how the organization struggles to respond to those expectations in a manner that we talk about. When that expectation is achieved, then the organization has achieved what we call the person job fitness. Number 5, we look at the nature and the causes of individual differences. These differences will be viewed at 2 levels, the psychological differences and the physical differences. So we look at those 2 levels, the psychological, the physical, as the foundations from which we draw the causes of the uniqueness of individual behavior at the workplace. Number 6, we'll try now to look at all that package of individual behavior vis-a-vis individual differences, how it comes to bear on the organization, and how it reveals itself within the individual through what we can now refer to as occupational personality. We'll actually be looking at what we call personality, but baptizing it occupational personality so that it can be considered uniquely in the workplace. This is why I'll be suggesting we look at two models of personality. There are so many models of personality understanding. For the sake of our discussion, we'll look at what we refer to as the 5-factor model of personality and what is popularly referred to as the Myers-Briggs type indicator of personality. So we hope to be able to go through those elements within about 20 slides or so. Now, having said that, we now move in our first consideration to attempt to define what individual differences and individual behavior in organizational behavior are. What is individual behavior? You see, from our devotion this evening, our reflections, I did mention that there is no way, I did it indirectly, mention that there is no way all people within the organization can be of the same behavior, of the same personality, of the same kind of presentation. I did say that from a Christian or religious perspective, we appreciate that we are created, though in the image and likeness of God, but we are created, each one of us, very uniquely. You know, some theological understandings indicate that the nature of God is such that he cannot repeat himself. He cannot repeat himself. He creates whatever he creates, a given level of perfection once. That will therefore mean every individual person is unique. Therefore, when we talk about individual behavior, we are talking about that functionality of a person, of the environment, of the organization, how those three things come to interact together: the person, the environment, the organization, how they interact together to produce the person we have, to produce the behavior we have in this individual. Some of the factors that may affect individual behavior could include the age of a person. The way an old person, an elderly person behaves would not be the way a youngster behaves. If you are a CEO in a company, if you are in charge of the human resource, HR, in a company, you cannot expect that the youthful people you have employed, say in their 20s, in their 30s, will behave exactly the same way as those who have been in that company, organization, and are remaining with perhaps 5-6 years to retire. So age can be a factor. The education background of an individual can be a reason for individual behavior. Religion, the faith of somebody, can be a reason for the uniqueness of somebody's behavior. Even the marital status and so many others. For example, I'm just mentioning here, we'll be talking about this much later. Think of gender very closely with the marital status. You see, you find a mother constantly absent or coming late to work. This defines individual behavior. Now, do we simply say, why are you coming late while everybody else is coming? Do we see the concept of marital status, the concept of motherhood as explaining that absenteeism or lateness to come to work? The same can also define the concept of turnover and satisfaction. You see? So behavior, individual behavior, is a mark of the individuality of the employees we have at the workplace. Now, talking about the other terminology, individual differences. Here we are referring simply to the variations, the variability in the individual's personal characteristics. You know, the variability in those very personal characteristics. Now these characteristics are attributed to this person. There is a very slight difference there between what we are referring to as individual differences and what we refer to as individual behavior. You see, individual differences is the function of looking at the personal characteristics. Now we are now moving at a level where we are about to appreciate so and so normally behaves or acts this way. It's part of his characteristic. So we're talking about the characteristics, we're talking about the traits, we're talking about the abilities of people, we're talking about the attitudes within the professional environment. So we are not simply talking about how they behave, but we are talking about very personalized, unique characteristics. The word personalized is central for me in the sense that we can be able to say, John is normally this way because of these particular traits, these particular abilities, these particular attitudes within him or so. So these differences may include things like personality, perception, values, abilities, skills, attitude, and even career choices. So these things, like the last word, career choices. You see, look at the people who are in your organization. Look at teaching profession, for example. And sometimes it has been said, a greater percentage of those who have joined the teaching profession in these latter days, a greater percentage could be defined as those who are looking for something else, who intended to do something else, whatever the else means. And then when that something else, when everything else failed, they found themselves in the teaching profession. Now, you see, unless during that training something radical happens deep in their personality, deep in their psyche, to change their perception, to change their values, to order their abilities and skills and attitudes towards certain career choices, you might find to understand sometimes individual differences between teaching staff in this given school could be a function of those things that are mentioned in career choices. This has never become his or her career choice, even if he has been a teacher for 20 years. That's why sometimes people say, you meet somebody who is a teacher, who is a doctor, who is a banker, who is whatever the career or profession, and you are interrogating him or her, and he tells you, I have 25 years experience, teaching experience. Now, what I'm going to say is humor. Somebody says, just to discover, this person does not actually have 25 years experience, teaching experience, though he has been teaching for 25 years. Fundamentally, this person only had 1 week experience, which was a very bad experience that has been repeated for 25 years. I think you get the difference there. I'm trying to pause humor there. Somebody has had a bad experience of 1 week when he first became a teacher, and that stuck into this person. And he has repeated that bad experience for 25 years, and he says he has 25 years experience of teaching. So you understand individual behavior, individual differences, what they are. Now, we make some move, and now we try to, we try to look at the foundations of individual behavior. What are the foundations of individual behavior? You know, from where do these individual behavior spring from? So we observe human behavior generally is an amalgam, is a bringing together of complex stimuli responses. These stimuli responses could be both internal as well as external. In other words, we respond, the stimulus we respond to, some of them may arise from within, others may arise from without, externally. You see? So human behavior becomes a conglomeration, a putting together, an amalgam of those complex stimuli responses. So you see somebody act in a particular way within an organization. You are about to say this is an indicator of rudeness. This behavior is an indicator of rudeness, or this behavior is an indicator of laziness. Now, come to think of it, no, the behavior you are seeing is a product of really complex processes, complex responses. Some are from within the person, others are from without the person, outside the person. The way a teacher teaches when he goes to that class, you know, look at the attitude. This could be something within, attitude that that teacher has towards the profession, as I've given that example. He's teaching, but he's not converted to the teaching profession. So he's doing it mechanically. You know, he's doing it very mechanically, teaching, but not converted to the profession. You know, teaching without a professionalized touch on what he is doing. So that touches on attitude. So that is a stimuli coming from within. Goes to that class to teach. Look at the perception that that teacher has of the learners in that class. That perception, if he views the learners as empty objects, empty tins to be filled by knowledge, then the teacher will be there in the order of what one of the educational thinkers, Paulo Freire in Brazil, put it, will be there to do the banking concept of instruction, just banking in, because he views the learners as very passive. So the perception that the teacher has of this. So you understand this. External, the way the headmaster, the head teacher has talked to this teacher before he went to class. So the way that teacher would act in that classroom, the way that banker will act towards the customers who come before him or her that day will be an amalgam of complex stimuli responses, both of which could be internal, others could be external. So the different models we have define how diverse factors determine behavior patterns. For example, think about what we call the basic psychological model. The basic psychological model that explains the diverse factors that order our behavior patterns. This basic psychological model was developed or propagated by the psychologist Levin. Sometimes it's referred to the field theory. According to this theory, people are simply influenced by a number of diversified factors. Now, these diversified factors, Levin mentions two important ones: genetical differences and environmental differences. So this genetical, the way people are born, what we'll see later, what we call inherited traits, and the environment they find themselves in. So when we mention the genetical traits and the environment people find themselves in, it means that the basic psychological model tries to explain individual behavior on the basis of nurture and nature. Nature in terms of, you know, you are born that way. You are born that way. Nurture, in terms of your interaction with the environment, has produced this within you. So that is the basic psychological model, according to Levin-Kat. We have the second model that I would like to look at, trying to understand the differences in people's behavior. You know, this discussion is very fundamental. You find yourself in that school as a head teacher. You find yourself in that school as a class teacher. You find yourself there as a head of department. You find yourself working in an NGO, a head of a given division, or dealing with the customer, maybe customers, maybe you are in charge of customer service. To try to understand people's behavior, to try to satisfy customer needs, will depend on your ability to understand the fountain of their behavior, not to be able to quickly say, look at how that one is behaving. So the basic psychological model can be summed up as, it explains to us human behavior as springing from two centers, nature and the nurture. The mass model, which we'll be looking at in more detail in some slide to come, you know, mass model, M-A-R-S, to mean motivation, ability, role perception, and the situation that somebody finds himself in, emphasizes the role of the internal and external factors or influences on one's behavior. You see,
Excuse me, Dr. Lee.
Yes, please, yes.
Can you come up again with the meaning of mass?
Mass, you can see it in the slide. It's in the second bullet. You can see it in the bullet. Motivation, ability, role, perception, you know, the way you view, you perceive roles, and then the situational factors. We'll look at this in a more detailed manner in some slide to come. So in case you miss, those words are in they are in the second bullet under mass. So we're talking about the mass model of individual behavior, explaining individual behavior on the basis of what motivates people, their ability, their perception, and the situation that they find themselves in. This element of the situation, you may want to bring there the environment. So you see, when you look at these four, motivation, ability, role perception, those are internal factors. Then how do they mingle up with the situational factors where somebody finds himself, the situation that somebody finds himself in? So how do these internal factors, you know, operate vis-a-vis the environment, the situation that somebody finds himself in, to produce the behavior that we see in an individual? In this context, therefore, mass model of individual behavior understands competencies. When we say so-and-so is competent, understands competencies as referring to the complete set of motivation, abilities, role perception, and situational factors that can contribute to the job performance. What we mean there is, the moment the motivations within an individual, what motivates an individual to come to school early, to come to the workplace early enough, to work, you know, more devotedly. You see, what motivates that individual taken together? So the motivations behind what somebody does, taken together with the abilities that that person has. We'll also be looking at those abilities. Some of these abilities, they are those learned abilities and inborn abilities. So when you put together motivations, what motivates an individual, his abilities, the concept of role perceptions, how the individual perceives the role that is put in. For example, if you are a master on duty, a mistress on duty in that school this week, you know, people say, when so-and-so is on duty in this school, there is a lot of order in the school, in the organization. Why? It could just be because of that third element, role perception, the way this teacher interprets, perceives his or her role as a master or a mistress on duty. Puts a whole difference between him and others. You know, you are a teacher of mathematics. The other one is a teacher of mathematics. How do you interpret, perceive your role as a mathematics teacher in that class? To cover the syllabus, the other day I was talking to some board of governors, board of management members in some school and some teachers. And we were trying to analyze the Form 4 results. And, you know, these teachers plus the director of studies said, we don't understand why these students are performing poorly. Of course, we have enough resources. We cover the syllabus early enough, and really insisted. Many people were asking, which months of the year do you cover syllabus? Say, we cover the syllabus by June. We cover the syllabus by May. We use the third term just to revise. We have covered syllabus. When I was asked to put some input, I asked the teachers, you put it rightly, you cover the syllabus. Do you notice that it is possible the teacher covers the syllabus, but the learner does not cover the syllabus? The teacher covers the syllabus in the presence of the learners, but the learner himself or herself never covers the syllabus. It is the teacher plowing through the syllabus. So you as a chemistry teacher, history teacher, mathematics teacher, how do you perceive your role as a teacher? Is your role of telling them? Is your role of igniting really facilitative learning, what we really would call heuristic learning, learning by self-discovery? What is your role? So competencies, I repeat again, puts together those four things according to Mass model of individual behavior. When we say this teacher is a competent Kiswahili teacher, is a competent branch manager, this person is a competent branch manager, then what we are talking about, we are saying the motivations within that individual, the abilities within the individual, the way he interprets his role or the role of that particular office, and the way he's able to master the situation that he or she finds himself in. They are put together in such a manner that they can contribute to the best job performance in that particular position. Maybe somebody would like, maybe 2 or 3 would like to comment on this. Chris, your hand is up.
Thank you, Dr. Maybe you will correct me. I don't know if the 2 models are enough or somebody is allowed to perhaps suggest another model that I feel fits into foundations of individual behavior. And if so, I'm just thinking of the sociological theory by the name social learning theory, as proponed by Albert Bandura, which says that individuals learn behavior by observation, by imitation, and by modeling. And then I'm actually looking at what you've been emphasizing on ability, the learning of the abilities. And looking at example, what Bandura says, that people behave from us. And you look at an organization, for example, from my field, you, for example, investigate a particular office and you realize that the HR the person in charge of finance and another person in another department have colluded to steal from the organization. And then you'd wonder where this behavior began from. Because then there's somebody in that particular organization, or what I would call within the cartel, who has been in the system and knows how the system works, and then will tell you, this is how we do things here, that you are supposed to sign a document without what they do. And therefore, I'm just thinking that as part and parcel of the models, Daktari, maybe we can also include the social learning theory, social learning model, as part of the individual behaviors that can be able to explain individual behaviors in an organization. Thank you.
You are right, Chris. And that's why I said I just picked two. We just picked two, but they are quite a number. So we've just picked two as demonstrations of theories that help us to explain, the various behavior. Juliet, you have your hand up. Juliet?
Thank you so much, Daktari. I just got interested with the example you gave when you're talking about appearing before a board, and maybe the school has been asked to account for the grades they got. There is a point you mentioned in terms of syllabus coverage and them talking about finishing it in June. And I think that's where most schools fall at. Because I remember even in our school, we are being told that by the end of April, we should be done with the Form 4 syllabus. So, and you say that you can finish the syllabus as the teacher and the learners have not cleared the syllabus, because it really interested me so much. So what do you mean by the learners have not cleared the syllabus? Does it mean you are taking them too fast? Is there something else you're supposed to do, and so on? It just interested me, being that I'm in that field, and most of the time that's one of the areas we fail. Let me say I fail as a teacher. I would just want to get to know your response on that, or your advice on that. Thank you.
Yeah, very well, Juliet. What I mean here, you see, assume you are a teacher of history and government in our high school, and you are supposed to teach, perhaps you are teaching in Form 1, Term 2, and you are teaching, remember the second topic in history and government, the origin and migration of the peoples of Kenya up to the 19th century. And you are supposed to show the migration routes of the Bantus, the Nilo, the Kushites. You are supposed to name some of these. Then you are supposed to proceed on and discuss the political, social, economic organizations of these people. And, in the name of we must cover syllabus, the issue is we referring to who? That's really where I'm coming at. We referring to the teacher must cover the syllabus. So covering the syllabus means that you talked about everything there. So you went before your learners, you said Bantus came from such and such a place, they moved this way, they reached Congo, whatever it is, they went that way, they went Lake Victoria, they are found here, this. You have said it, you have covered it. If you are tape recorded, surely you have evidence, the syllabus, that part is covered. But after you've just done it, that's why initially we've been having what we call learning objectives. Nowadays, we're talking about expected learning outcomes. If you are to check in those expected learning outcomes, you discover nobody has learned in that classroom, but you have failed it. So that is really what I'm talking about, Juliet. The teacher has covered the content, but the learner has not covered the content. So when asked, have you covered the syllabus? Unfortunately, it is the teacher being asked. And if the learner was to be asked, the learner may not understand what covering the syllabus means, may actually understand it to be equivalent to, did the teacher say such a thing? So this is perhaps not the best forum, I wish ahead we could have talked about this, to be able to understand philosophically what is teaching. What I think I mentioned that in the course ELP 610 last semester. What is teaching? What is learning? What should you do for you to say, I have taught or learning has occurred? So I think those are the dynamics that we must keep on reflecting about when we are in those schools, so that we are seen to contribute to learning. You know, teaching must be made to be subordinate to course learning. And it is not the teacher that learns. I think I said it last semester. It is the learner that learns, but the teacher must facilitate that learning. I must have seen the hand of Macho up at some given point.
Hi, Malimo. I actually wanted to respond to Juliet, and you've covered
Yes,
it well.
yes.
So thank you. I'll lower
Thank
my
you.
hand now.
Thank you very much. So we would like to make some further progress at this point. So having now, we would like now to summarize, this mass model of individual behavior, how it explains how individual behavior comes about. So we'd like to summarize it this way. When we look at this slide, for example, it summarizes actually those 4 elements that define individual behavior according to mass model. So you can now see mass. Somebody asked mass. You can now see mass model. So we're talking about motivation. We're talking about the ability somebody has. We're talking about the role perception. And I've tried to explain many of these, role perception. And then we're talking about the situational factors. All these combine together. You can see in that drawing, you can see motivation, ability, and role perception. These ones are fed from the values that the individual has, the personality of an individual, the perceptions of an individual, the emotion, the attitudes, the stress, even sometimes somebody would have. This is to say motivation, ability, and role perception are products of the internal forces, intrinsic forces in the employee. As the employee is at the workplace, he comes to the workplace with his values, his values. And perhaps before I go far, I made some notes when Chris was talking, and Chris mentioned about the workplace. Some people intending well, wishing to do well, but then they meet this employee, this worker, who tells them that, no, this is the way the system works. I was struck by those words that Chris used, the way the system works. And I was struck with the humor. I thought, how, you are told, you need to know how the system works. I know how the system works. No, is it really the system that works, or did you want to say, this is the way we corrupt the system? You corrupt this is the way we corrupt the system. And then we now say, it is not we who corrupted the system. That is the way the system works. I think you get that, my friends. You go to a system, you are working in the procurement office, you are used to adding letters of numbers where they are not. You are used to inserting signatures where they should not be inserted. In the name, corrupting the system for sometimes personal gain. We call it corruption, we call it nepotism, tribalism, whatever. You've advertised for jobs, you've given whatever it is, but when people apply, you have a soft eye as a panelist on the interview to bring in your cousin, whatever. Now, asked why this is happening, you say this is the way the system works. I don't think it's the way the system works, although it is in our vocabulary. It could be that this is the way we corrupt the system. All right, so you notice I'm talking about, I revisited that discussion from Chris in the sense that when we consider three things: motivation, ability, and role perception. You know, what motivates you to work the way you are working? Perhaps it's because of the paycheck and so forth. Your ability, what's your ability? Sometimes you find people, you know very well, you don't have the ability to do ABCD, but because of the benefits you get from that position, you accept the position. Sometimes, I think a week or two ago, we did mention that there are some people, there are some organizations whereby when we understand what promotion means, promotion literally means being promoted to positions that you are incapable of holding, because the headmaster of the school has retired and you are the senior teacher or you are the deputy head teacher. You assume the position. The truth is that you are good enough as a head of department, good enough as perhaps a deputy, but not good enough as a head teacher. So talking about ability. So yes, is there some hand up? No, of course, sorry for that. So talking of ability, we are mentioning please, that person, please. So talking of these elements, we can say, oh no, please, that person. Oh no, please, please. Mute.
Ruth, you are interfering with our class, Ruth.
See what we can do. I hope he has heard. I hope she has heard. So I'm saying, looking at the four elements and focusing on the three, motivation, ability, and role perception. The three are what we call the internal forces of individual behavior, the internal forces. These internal forces are products of our values, our upbringing, whatever values within us, products of our personality, perception, emotions, attitude, the state of mind we are in, either stressed or whatever. They produce these three. Then these three are refined through situational factors, the situation you find yourself in. And that situation you find yourself in now produces really the individual behavior that we are now talking about. So you see, situational factors present to us what we can call the external forces that come our way. So I think you are able to see how that model, the mass model, works. The mass model works. Is there any intervention, please? Somebody would like to make an intervention on this model before we make progress?
A question, Dr.
Yes, please.
So, the individual internal factors, should they be at any given moment be interfered with the external? And at what point should one say no to external factors so that to uphold values, attitudes, and more specifically, integrity at our work or an organization? Thank you.
All right, Chris, I wouldn't prefer we use the word interfere. You see, some slide back, we talked about complex amalgam. Behaviors are produced as a result of, complex mixing of both internal and external stimuli. So it is not interference. In fact, that's why I struggled to use this word, refining, so that, the sieve you are using to get your tea done is not interfering with the tea, but is a kind of an intervention to have, sieved tea, so that, you have your values, you have your personality, you have your perception, all these elements feeding into what motivates you, For example, if you have what we can call utilitarian values, everything you come across, you look at it, you interpret it on the utilitarian foundations. By this, I mean the right thing is the one that brings about the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So that the idea is, does this thing make people happy? Oh yes, they clap. So you do it, you know it is wrong, but it makes people who do not know happy. So look at, what are your values? What is motivating you? You go to that school and notice parents have been told to bring 1,000 shillings each. Some will be able, some will not be able. Now, ministry says don't teach on weekends or on holidays, whatever. But in that school, you say, no, we'll teach. We are helping learner. You give a very good explanation, very good professional explanation. But look at it. The moment you discover parents are no longer bringing this money, then you stop that. Not because you are unable to go to school, the school is far. Not because, you are hungry, but it's about what motivated you to do what you are doing. So I will not want to call this interference, but I will say the way you see the arrows pointed from motivation at that center, from ability to that center, from role perceptions to that center. Now, they go through kind of a tunnel, as it were, whereby they are sprayed, I'm using some figurative language, they are sprayed upon by situational factors, the situation that somebody finds himself in. For example, there is motivation, there is ability, there is role perception. The situation somebody finds himself in, poverty, for example. That situation of poverty, how does it mingle? That's the word. How does it mingle? Not how does it interfere, but how does it mingle with one's motivation, with one's ability, with one's perception to produce that individual behavior that we have at the end? I think, Chris, you get that, eh? So we can't talk about interference. So now we would like to look at each of these, perhaps just briefly. We look at each of these briefly. And to begin us off, we look at number one, motivation, that M for motivation. So just to explain a little bit more, when we talk about employee motivation, or rather when we talk about motivation, we are talking about what we are calling employee motivation. We are talking about the forces within a person that affects their direction, their intensity, and their persistence of voluntary behavior. Forces within the person affects the direction they take on an issue, the intensity, the force with which they undertake that issue. So this teacher within the school, or rather, we're talking about this sub-county where we have the sub-county director of education. What is his or her motivation of visiting schools in the sub-county? When you talk about what are his or her motivation, we are saying, what are the forces within that person, that sub-county, director of education, that affects his or her direction to go to that school? Why does he or she visit that particular school once every month, but there are other schools within the sub-county he or she has never visited for the last 2 years since he reported in that sub-county? What are the issues within the person that affects or causes him or her to act in that direction, to visit that school? Why is it that whenever whatever it is, he's always calls the head teacher, now, I'm coming, can I visit your school? The intensity. Why the persistence of that would be, quote unquote, voluntary behavior? He finds himself or herself visiting that school. That way we are defining the motivation. What motivates that employee? What motivates that bank manager? What motivates that official within the NGO, whatever? So motivation here, we're talking about direction. Direction refers to the path along which people steer their effort, where they put their effort. That's why I've given that example. And I think when I talk, listen to the unspoken word that I'm trying to say. Listen to the unspoken word. Look at my example. Why is it that that sub-county director of education visits school A, B, C, D once every month? Why is it he has given a directive that you should never have a BOM meeting in my absence? You must always invite me. Why is it so? But there are some schools there, you know, he or she even did not attend the inauguration of the BOMs. Why is it so? Direction refers to the path along which people steer their effort. Why is the effort of this sub-county director of education on that path? Intensity is the amount of effort allocated in the goal. Why that intensity? The amount of effort allocated to the goal. Persistence is continuing the effort for a certain amount of time, continuing that effort. So motivation is about those three things. What are the things that are operating within this individual to explain what this person actually is doing? We call that motivation, as it were. So that's the first M, mass, motivation. Now, look at the second factor in a mass model, what we call the employee ability. The ability, the word is ability. We're talking about ability. Now, ability here would refer to the natural aptitudes. Natural aptitudes, I referred to this a little bit earlier. Natural aptitudes is what we'll talk about, gifted to this individual by birth. Natural aptitudes, ability. We also talk about the learned capabilities, those that are obtained from the environment. So again, here you see gifted from birth, by nature, learned from the environment, by nature. So elements that are required to perform that particular organizational task effectively or successfully. You know, here we're talking about the ability. So ability of the individual will include both inborn and learned elements that combine together to enable the person practically perform the task given to him or her more successfully. Now, so you see there are those two components, the aptitudes, and then the capabilities. Natural aptitudes, you know, inborn. Capabilities referring to what somebody has learned. So looking at aptitudes here, aptitudes are the natural talents. Natural talent. These natural talents could be in form of physical, mental, you know. Physical, for example, you talk about the physique of a person, you know, the physique of a person. We'll be talking about, you know, mental also, the mental disposition of a person. So all that would help an employee learn specific tasks more quickly and perform them better, you know. So these aptitudes, you'll now be talking about, for example, when you are supposed to hire, you know, people in security, you know, do you simply say academic? No, there could be certain things. Somebody may have even the right academic papers, whatever, but may not be taken because the understanding here would be that you needed also people of certain natural talent. So somebody could be having this intellectual capability, mental, but there is something physical that you need in that particular organization. So when you are hiring people within your employees within your organization, the whole idea is, where do you place aptitudes? How do aptitudes play a role in trying to constitute the human resource of the organization? Look at, secondly, the learned capabilities, which are the skills, the knowledge that you probably currently possess learned capabilities. You know, why we are putting a tag, you probably currently possess, it means that tomorrow you may learn new capabilities that may change your state of understanding. So whatever the case, I repeat again, these two elements, the aptitudes and the learned capabilities, combine to define what we refer to as competencies. You know, the two, the learned capabilities, the aptitudes, they all combine together to define competencies. So when we talk about, you know, employee, you know, competence, ability, you know, competence in terms of ability, we are talking about how aptitudes and learned capabilities within this individual employee are combined together to define the characteristics of a person that now will produce superior performance within that particular organization. So that is what we talk about ability. Now we talk about, still talking about those abilities a little bit more. Now, these abilities can be grouped differently, apart from looking at them in terms of, you know, learned and inborn. You may also look at them grouped in terms of, you know, intellectual abilities, you know, like a person's intelligence, verbal and analytic reasoning abilities, memory, verbal comprehension, and so forth. You may talk of them about, talking about the physical abilities of a person. I've mentioned something about this, talking about, for example, the physical strength, the stamina, the body coordination, the motor skills, you know, like you're talking about the example I gave in security. And then you talk about another category where we talk about the self-awareness abilities, which symbolizes how a person feels about the task, you know, while a manager's perception of his ability decides the kind of work that needs to be allocated to that individual. The question is, how does the person himself think about that task that is being given? That's what we're talking about, self-awareness. You know, you are made to be a class teacher. You see, the manager's perception of your abilities causes the manager to make you, the head teacher to make you a class prefect. Now, self-awareness as an ability is asking, how do you yourself, you know, feel about that task? You know, that is really self-awareness ability. So these three are supposed really to combine together to create, or rather to explain, what we are referring to as really the competencies. So I think you can understand what we refer to as abilities there. Now we look at the third one which we are referring to as the role perception. So now, looking at the role perception, that's really the R, the third element in the model. So this one is a measure of the degree to which a person understands the job duties assigned to or expected of him. You see, so the measure, you know, something closer to self-awareness abilities. So perception here, role perception. How do you perceive the role? You see, that's why I said it is closely connected to what we refer to as the self-awareness abilities. So the perception part of it, how do you understand the job duties that are assigned or are expected of you? You make this person a branch manager. Role perception, how does he perceive, you know, that role? You know, you make somebody a CEO. You know, perception is about, you know, very intricate things. Would be this person as a CEO, the manner of dress, even the way he presents himself before people daily as a CEO, is something about this third element, the R, the role perception as the measure of the degree to which you understand, you know, the job duties that are assigned to you as a CEO. So this role perception exists in actually three forms. How you view the role, how you understand the role assigned to you exists in three forms. So it is about one's understanding of the specific duties or consequences for which they are accountable. You know, do you understand the specific duties when we talk about role perception? You know, as a master on duty, do you understand the duties as the head teacher of that school? Role perception. Remember, we are discussing the elements, 4 elements that produce the behavior that people see in you. So you are a bank manager. You work as a teacher. You work in a given NGO. You are a receptionist, a secretary, whatever it is in that organization. Role perception, you know, the measure of the degree to which you understand the job duties that are assigned to you or are expected of you. If you are a receptionist, if you are a secretary to that boss, how do you understand? So this understanding manifests itself in 3 forms. The first form is, do you understand the specific duties? Specific duties means nobody else can do this. If you don't do it, nobody else in the organization will do it. So do you understand the specific duties? So, dear friends, you now understand why sometimes organizations collapse. You see, there is the understanding people are employed in that organization, people have job description, as it were. But you see, all of us have tended to do what the other one should do because occasionally he does not do it. Now, when the others decide to do what specifically they are accounted for, they are supposed to do, then this particular person fails to do his or her part and the organization collapses. So, role perception, when you are promoting people in your organization, find out, are you promoting this person from this level to this level because the level you are promoting him or her to has a vacancy? Or do you promote that person because he qualifies for that position? Think you get that intricate question. Again, I put, when you promote people, when you call for interviews, application for a given job, and you call for interviews, when you interview people, do you interview people because positions are vacant? Do you fill those positions? Do you put somebody in that position because the position must be filled? Or do you fill this person with that position because this person you are filling into that position, one, understands the specific duties, the specific outcome that is expected of him, that he or she ought to be accounted for? The first form of role perception. The second form, the second issue is, does this person understand the priority of his or her various tasks and performance expectation? When in that position, when as a master on duty, a mistress on duty, do you have a concept of, you know, hierarchical ranking in the order of priority that you are supposed to attend to? If you are a class teacher, if you are working in an organization, do you have an understanding of the priorities of that position? You know, so we're talking about the priority of their various tasks and performance expectation. Do you understand that, or you simply do it? If, for example, you are a CEO and the people visit you, people visit from some office and they're talking to you endlessly and there is something else to be attended to, can you be able to put a priority? Do you understand this? That is something, an element of perception, how you understand this perception. Thirdly, we talk about the preferred behaviors for accomplishing the assigned task. Do you understand the preferred behavior? I want to use a very crooked example here. If you are to be, you are, for example, hiring a CEO of a company. Perhaps you belong to the board of directors of a company, and you are supposed to have an interview to hire a CEO of the company. And fortunate or unfortunate, the people who have applied, some of them really have been working in the organization, while some have come from outside. So the third element of role perception, this person, does he understand the preferred behavior, how a CEO should behave? For example, the mode of dress. Does he understand the mode of dress? The mannerisms of speech. Does he understand the mannerisms of speech? The idea here is, does the person understand the behaviors that are preferred by the position for which he or she is seeking to fill? So really, role perceptions are important because they represent how well really an employee knows where to direct his effort. You know, they are about how employees perform more accurately and efficiently. You see, to perform more accurately, to perform more efficiently, you've got to have a clear understanding, a clear perception of really what you are working in, or rather the position you are working in. So once more again, I'm putting it here. Really, when we are filling a position, we must not only look at the position being vacant, but we must look at the competence. Meaning, it must become possible, dear friends, that you can advertise a position in an organization, shortlist people, they come for interviews, because you see, interview is supposed to look into these things. Because during shortlisting, you look at those things you mentioned. Should have a degree, should have a master, should have this, should have at least a training in this. So those things will be demonstrated in paperwork. But now the interview in the engagement must raise questions. Those who sit on that panel must have those penetrating eyes that will get into some of these elements that we see in mass model. You see, these models are not about what the candidate will produce in paper or on paper in terms of certification, but they are as a result of, you know, penetrating those internal forces within the individual. That's why some people have opted, even when they employ a CEO, they employ somebody, they put that person on probation just to see whether these things are there. These things are there. So to have really more accurate and efficient performance, it's really important that the individuals we bring in an organization have a clear role perception of the situations they are getting into. Now, the last factor here in mass model, which is really now extrinsic factor, an extrinsic force, is what we're referring to as the situational factors, So again, here you see, remember, situational factor is, if you like, all the intrinsic factors that we've seen in terms of really motivation, ability, and role perception. You know, you could look at it in terms of the seed you are going to plant, I think it is Chris who questioned about this some minutes ago. Look at the internal forces, motivation, ability, and role perception as defining the intrinsic force, the internal forces found within that maize seed, within that bean seed. Now, situational factors, look at it in terms of how did you prepare the land that you are going to place in the seed? How did you apply fertilizer? Was it NPK or DAP? Look at it, how deep did that seed get into the soil? How much soil covered the seed? When did you do the weeding? These are now situational factors, factors that are external. The seed might be taken from the same bag, planted in land A and planted in land B. But situational factors differing, they'll produce a different kind of behavior, different outcome. Therefore, situational factors here are really individual behavioral performance. I mean, it helps us to understand individual behavioral performance depends on the environment also that somebody finds himself in. The way people will behave, the way they will perform in an organization. A teacher in school A behaves this way. When you transfer him to school B, behaves differently. You see? So situational factors are usually conditions beyond the employee's immediate control. You know, they can either act positively or negatively in producing or determining behavior and performance. So they may include things like time, the time given, you know, to accomplish a task. You see, if the CEO says this task must be completed within 1 week. So two elements in terms of time. Remember, try to build everything we are doing with what we've covered before. Time element in task accomplishment has something to do with you can either give 1 week to complete that task, but the fact is, actually, people required just 2 days. That's why the people will wait. I think we covered that sometimes back. People will wait until that last moment, then they'll act within the 2 days. Like, you know, when we had these assignments last semester, there are those who waited until the last minute, even to be reminded so that they could bring in the assignment time. So the time allocated, is it too much or is it too little? Both would apply in situational factors. People, you know, the people around you. My grandfather once told me that you can choose where to buy land, but you cannot choose a neighbor. And he cautioned me, learn simply how to live with, to coexist with the neighbors. You may not like them, they may not like you, but learn to coexist with them. He repeated, you may choose where to buy land, but you may not choose your neighbor. Because even if you choose your friends and you say, we are going to buy plots in that kind of estate, and we live neighbor by neighbor to one another, one of you will actually sell his plot, and the person to buy would be the worst that you expected. So you can choose where to buy land, but you can't choose a neighbor. So that's what we are talking about. We are saying these elements, the employee does not have control. The people that are, for example, employed in the organization to be core task performers. You know, in that school, you are teaching 5 people in the mathematics department. You may not have the right to choose to determine, to control who works with you. Look at budgets, look at the work facilities. So these are now situational, external factors that still work to affect and modify, you know, one's behavior. So they act in a manner that they affect actually how somebody would be able to work. Now, putting a summary to these various factors that influence individual behavior, we can be able to say this in summary, or rather trying to look at it in the light of, you know, summarizing the very many varied factors that influence individual behavior. We can look at this in terms of personal factors, think about the psychological factors, think about environmental factors, and think about organizational factors. We are now just trying to blow this one much bigger to understand how individual behavior is caused. So look at these 4 divergent or varied sources of influence. Look at personal factors. In personal factors, you are talking about the physical characteristics of a person. You are talking about the age of a person who determine his behavior, we said. You are talking about gender. And this is something, for example, gender issues, something really to discuss about. in the sense that, you know, with due respect, you know, people talk about somebody being gender biased. But I want to introduce a new dimension to gender discussion, especially in organizational behavior. You see, as much as we talk about gender equality, or is it gender equity, the question I place before ourselves is this: is it true that members of both genders are able to do whatever the situation it is, or can gender determine, you know, individual behavior and be able to determine occupational behavior or even occupational appointment? Can gender be at once an enabling factor for somebody to get into a certain position in an organization? Looked at it conversely, can gender be a limiting factor? So gender is an issue as a personal factor. Education, educational background, marital status, I've explained, experience that somebody has, intelligence, ability. So all these can be grouped together as personal factors. And then you have the psychological factors, things like personality, perception, attitude, values, the learning, you know, how you learn and so forth. And then you have the environmental factors. Think about this from our previous class. The political factors, the economic factors, the social-cultural factors, the technological factors. Remember, we mentioned this technological factor, the tools for production within an organization. And then think about the organizational factors in terms of the physical facilities, still blowing up that technological factors, the physical facilities, the organizational structure and design. Think about the leadership, you know, what is the nature of the leadership? Is it linear? Is it cyclic? What is the nature of that leadership within? What about the reward system within an organization? So these four elements offer us with a summative way of defining the causal factors of individual behavior within an organization. So these four really give us that, you know, that overall element. So you see, these elements define the behavior within an individual, define the assets within an individual. The individual who comes to an organization seeking a job, the individual who is employed within that organization, comes with these elements. These elements, majority of them could be the strength that he brings to the organization. A few, of course, could be the weaknesses he brings to the organization. So the reverse is, how does the organization behave in giving a welcoming environment, in welcoming this strength within the individual? Maybe some interventions at that point. So to this point, we have discussed what individual behaviors are. We've also discussed the causal factors of this individual behavior. In other words, we can now be able to explain this person behaves this way because of this and this reason. Interventions, please. Any interventions? Yes, I can see Osanya.
Yes, Dr. Thank you for the class. I'm just wondering loudly.
Yes.
There is a difference, a big difference. There are difference between, I'm looking at organizational factors to be so close to environmental factors. In that I'm thinking an organization can be the environment in itself. And especially like maybe an individual does very well, could be doing, maybe, let me give an example of Red Cross. When I was in Red Cross, the performance was very high. Then maybe I've gone into another organization, let me say another organization, and my performance is a bit low. Could the organization be the same as the environment?
My thinking is organizational factor. I start with environmental factors. Looks at elements outside the organization, which all the same, they affect the employee. For example, the economic factors, the economic crash down that we are having, for example, in the world. It may not be directly an organizational factor, but something outside the individual employee and outside the organization. The political factors, the social-cultural factors. You work in, say, put it now where? You work in Mumias Sugar Company, for example, as a CEO or whatever level you are working on. So you see, there is the organizational factors in terms of the physical facilities within Mumias Sugar Company, the organizational structure and design, the leadership, the reward system within the organization. But there is the political factors outside that organization, outside Mumias Sugar, the economic factors, the social-cultural factors, the people around Mumias Sugar. How do they behave, when, for example, a person has been crushed by a tractor? How do they behave? Maybe they expected that the Mumias Sugar, their cultural factor is that, the CEO must come and they dance in that compound or something, and you didn't do it. It becomes an environmental factor, or the fact that you went and they danced, or you went there, perhaps your cultural background, you go there in black suit, that's the highest honor. But if you arrive there in black suit, according to your culture, people understand this CEO must be the one who killed this man. He should have come in white. You see that black. So you notice cultural factors. In fact, the proper understanding of technological factors, things outside the organization. Osanya?
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you.
Good. Madiam?
Yeah, thank you very much for that so far. And I like this summary in the table. I work for an NGO, a non-governmental organization in health. And I realize that lots of the stuff that you're talking about fall in here. I wanted to highlight two things, excuse me. The issue of gender, and you basically talked about two genders. And you've put it under the personal factor. One of the things I've observed in the NGO world, I think under environmental factors, is that there is something about global trends. And we seem to have trends that come and then go after a while. When there was the issue of Oxfam and buying sex from participants of relief in Haiti, suddenly all NGOs went about sexual and gender-based policies in all organizations. And about for 2 or 3 years, if you recall the Me Too movement also, that determined folks' behavior for that period of time. Now, another time we get the thing that is called decolonizing development, in which the global south, that is where we folks fall in, apparently it becomes a fad for us to be considered in being listened to in terms of determining how global development should happen. And then you find this happens for a period of time. Why I am bringing this is because, as you've said, I think you're answering, maybe it was Chris who was talking about this is how the system works. And you said very clearly in terms of, is the truism actually how we corrupt the system? So following up on that, individuals sometimes join our NGO works and then they ask, how do people behave here? They want to adapt a behavior based on the organizational factor of the values the organization says it is dealing with. And the organization seems to be alert every now and then to understand what are the global trends currently going on so that they fit within it. So what's the term it's called? The ability of one to be agile becomes a key issue on the personal factors affecting the individual's behavior. Thanks. Sorry for sharing for long, but I see the way this works. Over to you,
Very
Dr.
well, very well, very well, Madiang. Cindy? Cindy?
Daktari, yes, Daktari. I wanted to ask, what's the role of passion and interest when it comes to individual behavior? Because we are talking about performance in an organization where, like Osanya shared his experience, talking about when he was in Red Cross, he performed better than where he is currently. So do passion or what someone is passionate about and someone's interest play a role in individuals' behavior in an organization?
Very well, Cindy. My thinking would be that you give us two elements, passion and interest. I quickly would imagine they can be divided in such a manner that interest could come under personal factors. I would place that under the personal factors. And I would place passion under the psychological factors. Although at a second thought, they seem also all can equally be put under the psychological factors very, very, very effectively. Now, looking at this, I would think that the two elements you mentioned, they operate under the auspice of motivation. What motivates you? So that were we to go back to mass, really our understanding of mass model, then we would be able to ask the question, you know, under mass, we are saying, what motivates you? So, Cindy, you seem to say that one would be saying this employee is motivated by passion. You notice passion, the way you put it, passion appears to us to be a powerful intrinsic force. It is not extrinsic, a powerful intrinsic force. And of course, once you lose that passion, the motivation would go down. You know, what motivates you to teach? Not just money, to see a better world. What motivates you? You work perhaps as a nurse. You work in the medical profession. What motivates you? Is it a simple idea that I'm on duty? I'm on duty this coming week. I'm on night duty, so that you are there, you know, to fulfill the fact that you logged in and you log out in the morning and leave. So what is motivate the passion behind it? Now, interest.
Daktari, sorry.
Yes, Madiang, yes.
So where you are talking about this passion, it kind of reminds me when you were asking us about what is your personal philosophy towards the work that you are doing. Does that also include part of the passion? Over to you.
Yes, that is it, Madiang. It must come, I seem to understand what you want to say by lacking the words. I'm trying to say passion to me is an element of the gut force, the gut force. Passion will overlook the challenges. Passion will conquer the boundaries. Passion will conquer the frontiers of organizational challenges. You know, passion is this thing that will make you go to that school as a teacher of mathematics, as a teacher of Kiswahili, and you hear that in that subject, this school has been performing very poorly, and you pick up a class in Form 1, and you journey with it up to Form 4. You don't teach another class, you are journeying with that class up to Form 4. And look at the grades you produce. You leave, you go to another school, and other teachers take the next class. Look at the grades they have achieved. And then somebody wants to understand why. Is it that the learners that came when you are teaching were extraordinarily bright, fast learners? Somebody say no. The passion the teacher had for the subject. That passion, if you are a teacher, it will affect, for example, we are saying these things affect your performance. It will affect your pedagogical choices, that passion you have. Interest the same. But you see, for me, passion is a deeper internal force than even interest. Cindy? Cindy? Please, we would like to remind everybody to mute their microphones when they are talking things outside class.
Wasanya.
Good.
Please.
Right.
Okay, Daktari.
Yes.
Daktari, thank you for that response. So I'm asking myself, what happens when the only motivating factor is the salary? Because, okay, with this economy, and then, okay, as I am passionate about teaching and I'm interested about that. So what happens if I come across an advert where there is which is offering very good terms in terms of the salary, and then I'm looking at the economy and I'm like, well, I'm passionate about teaching, but this job seems to have a good salary. And then I move into that organization, not because I'm passionate, not because I'm interested in performing in that particular organization, but because the economy pushes me to develop an interest to get interested in applying for that job. So that means that the only motivating factor is the salary. So what happens to an individual behavior in that situation?
For me, Cindy, I would think we need to pull that argument to its conclusive end. You have a very good argument. We need to pull it to its conclusive end by not just talking about what happens to the individual behavior of that particular employee because he's being moved by purely salary, the material benefit. But we need also to ask, what happens to the task performance? Two things. What happens to the organization because this employee got into this position because of the money he's going to get? Therefore, what happens to the organization? We are going to talk about that in the next slide. What happens to the organization? That's one side. And then two, what happens to the individual? You moved there because you wanted money. Do you now see this is part of what has resulted into what we call sometimes burnout? An employee is there, he gets the huge salary he gets because he was moved because of salary. But now he's no longer interested in that job because he did not move there to work. He was not motivated to move there because of work. So he's there, and sooner or later, burnout is not just a function of you have overworked, you are a work alcoholic, but burnout can also be a function of you are there, but interested in nothing, you are doing nothing. Nothing any longer excites you. You see, you are working in a private school, for example, or you are teaching in a private school, private university, whatever it is. What I want you to see, I'm working for this university. It pays me this amount. Now, another university wants to offer, sorry, my voice. Another university wants to offer slightly more money, sometimes even for doing less work than I've been doing there. So I would like you to look at this, Cindy, in two ways. One, if you have moved there because of, we are choosing one factor we are just choosing one factor you mentioned for argument's sake, because of money, then chances are you may not perform because you are not being motivated directly by, the task performance. And so the organization will suffer. On the other side, flip side, you may move there, money is there, but you are this kind of people who love to work. So chances are you are not, you are going to suffer what we call, no self-fulfillment. You don't delight, self-fulfillment in your job, as it were. So that is what I can say about this, in the sense that there is a need to balance these things as we move, because you see, your livelihood as an employee may not simply be a function of money, may also be as a function of job satisfaction. That's the terminology I've been struggling to get, job satisfaction. And in any case, Cindy, look at it this way, and plus our many colleagues here present. If everybody else moved from that profession, I'm just trying to rationalize on this because of this. And then if you had teachers, for example, moving into this because you needed this, then the question to us is, who will teach? There is a way over and above the material benefit in this universe we live in, as we said in our introductory devotion cum reflection. God creates individuals and orders them, as it were, into certain portfolios for the good of humanity, such that as much as this profession will not be well-paying, there'll be individuals, not just as a result of their academic qualifications and the like, there'll be people in this world who are dying to be professional teachers and are not willing to move out of professional teaching to other jobs that are paying more, because they have a deeper element of looking at teaching as a core. I think that's the word. Macho.
Mwalimu, I was just wondering, even as we've been discussing,
yes.
There's an example that one of my colleagues gave about somebody moving from, in one organization they look very passionate, and in another one they don't seem to be as passionate as they were in the previous one. And I just wanted to also indicate probably that environmental factors, the environment where you work in can affect your passion for work. So for example, you are all out, if we use the example of a teacher, you are all out, you want your kids to succeed, and you want to work with these kids from Form 1 to Form 4. But then the principal says, no, you stick to Form 1, you're not moving with these ones up to Form 4. So again, as much as you're very passionate and you want to, to do a lot, and I know passion can really drive you to do many things and find opportunities even in the impossibilities. But sometimes the environmental factors and political factors for some of us can scale you down in terms of how far you can go and how much you can push, even as you are passionate.
Right. Thank you very much, Macho. And I think what I pick from your contribution is that what we are learning goes deep into ourselves whenever we are given to occupy managerial positions, whatever the level in an organization. Like what Florence, you mentioned, if you are to become a head teacher in that school, then you can understand how you need to balance this. Like I know there has been, for example, a tradition in universities. It's a very traditional academic culture that had it that the very best, whatever best means, the very best professors of the university are specifically supposed to teach in first year study, maybe up to second year, and not go beyond that. And the argument used to be, because they are the very best brain, the very refined, with the very refined pedagogies, with the very refined ways of articulating knowledge in a given discipline, they are the best ones placed to invite the neophytes into academia, so that they are the ones to give the neophytes the academic foundations before. So these are some of the things. And then, we are giving that example. To what extent, again, can we argue you plant a seed and you watch over this seed, quote unquote, until it reaches Form 4, say in Kiswahili, in mathematics, whatever. So we do not have any straitjacket explanations. These are the things that must get into you as a manager in an organization. If you are a branch manager, you now see how you need to oscillate those employees, your staffers. This one maybe needs to be customer care manager. This one perhaps needs to be operations manager. This one's perhaps in the field. And this one can come here for the best interest of two things, of the organization and also the employee. Now, to understand this concept, for the best interest of the employee and for the best interest of the manager, we now look at this element of employee psychological contract vis-a-vis what we call organizational person-job fit or person-job fitness. Odelo will be coming a little bit later, just a moment, we make progress here. So these two concepts, psychological contract vis-a-vis the organization's struggle to create a person job fitness. What does it mean? Simply put is this way: whenever any employee comes to an organization, whenever an employee is employed in a given organization, he comes there with certain perceptions about that organization. These perceptions have to do with what we have said, expected benefits that he's likely to get from that organization. Therefore, this employee will pour down his or her contribution to that organization in terms of the effort he or she gives, the skills he or she has, the ability, time, loyalty, plus all those internal factors that we've been talking about. He brings those elements to the service of the organization. And in return, this employee expects some outcome from the organization. So we're trying to say, we are talking about something, although in this slide notes, you can see the concept of pay, promotion, job security, etc. But in trying to explain this in class form, we are talking about something greater than simply the employee being paid, the employee being promoted, the employee being assured job tenure, job security, and so forth. We are talking about something deeper that will ultimately define what we call job satisfaction, one, and two, not only job satisfaction, but individual satisfaction. Away from job satisfaction, we are trying to explain what we can call individual satisfaction. So in a nutshell, we are saying, as an employee comes to an organization to work for it, that's what we're saying, the psychological contract is formulated at the onset of one's relationship with an organization. As somebody comes to the organization, he comes there expectant to give what I have in terms of skills, ability, etc., my attitude, whatever. That's why sometimes you hear people join organizations with very good attitudes. After 5-6 years, the attitude is very negative. What are we talking about? How did the attitude become very negative? No, somebody comes to work in that company. Look, the first 3, 4, 5 years, very high attitude, very positive attitude, perception right, understanding what is expected of him or her, and doing it very right. But after 2, 3 years, you find things change to the negative. We can understand this situation by understanding the concept of psychological contract. The employee comes to the organization. Deep in himself or herself, he promises himself to pour out fully to the organization and expects the organization will reciprocate in a particular manner. Now, this relationship between the employee expectations that causes him or her to pour out into the organization vis-a-vis his or her expected benefits. And I want to underline, expected benefits go beyond pay, promotion, job security, although these are the elements we are using. So the relationship between these two things, what I feel deep in myself, I will give, why I feel I'll give it, and what I expect to get from this defines what we call a psychological contract by the employee. Now, this contract is never written down in terms of a signed legal contract or agreement. However, although not written down, it is at the heart of the employee's task performance, and it is also at the heart of the organizational success. So, you see, on the part of the organization now will expect the individual to satisfy the organization's needs. You see, the employee comes and feels that I will pour out my skills and I will receive this. That's the employee's thinking. The organization has needs, has tasks to be performed. So the organization expects the individual employee to satisfy his needs, his task performance. So also, it also promises itself, as it were, that when these tasks are fulfilled, it will respond to the employee's needs or expectations this way. So you can see that meeting point, never written, but forming a very fundamental contract, unwritten contract, but very fundamental for the life of the organization. So that is the concept of a psychological contract. Now, on the other part, the organization now must move out to do something. It commits itself to do something, to give certain benefits. These benefits may be material, may be psychological, whatever it is, to that employee, so that these benefits become really what we can call inducements. We are calling them organizational inducements. We call them inducements because they are the ones that are going to attract the employee to give in more into the organization. Now, when the two balance, that is the organizational inducements, what the organization is willing to give in terms of the material benefits, the non-material benefits, when the organization gives those inducements, when those inducements are made to balance with really the employee's psychological expectation or a contract, when they balance properly in such a manner that the employee feels appreciated, he feels his expectations and the needs are met, and the organization also feels his task performance, as it were, is met, then when they reach that agreement, that equilibrium is the one now we describe as the person job fitness, that the organization has reached the organization plus the employee, they have reached the point that we describe as person job fit. So we are saying further here that the organization, once it struggles now to reach that point You know, that point of agreement, that point where the psychological contract embraces the person job fitness. And then the organization is at that point whereby it will actually take the greatest advantage of the employee's job-related behaviors and abilities. Whereas again, the employee on the other hand is taking the greatest advantage of the organizational inducements to give himself or herself more to the organization. So I think with that, you should be able to understand those elements, how the two come together to define actually, you know, what in ordinary words we can call job satisfaction. So this job satisfaction is not only when the employee is happy, but is also when the organization is quote unquote happy. Any comments on that? Maybe one or two? Any comments on that? Maybe one or two? I hope you get the concept. Yes, Osanya? Osanya?
Thank you. I'm just wondering,
yes,
on point number 2, that
yes,
the overall set of expectations that an individual holds with respect to his or her contributions to the organization and the organization's response to those contributions, is this conscious or unconscious? I
would say it is both. It is both. It is both. Conscious in the sense that you see, for example, we're talking about, pick an example of promotions. You see, the employee is putting in his effort, his skill, his ability, his time, his loyalty, etc. to the organization. He qualifies for a promotion and is aware of that. Some other people are promoted, he's not promoted, or for some reasons, you are told there are no budgets, don't allow promotions because promotions will come with added salary, so he's not promoted. So you see, that is a case of where the employee is really conscious of that on the conscious level. But it can also be unconscious, especially, small things in the name of the employees does something and he expects to be congratulated. It's really, as a manager, small things as you've done well, you've done well. Like in a classroom, a learner answers a question well. And you asked, name the highest mountain in Kenya. Jen raised her hand up and said, Mount Kenya. And the teacher responded, yeah, so we now know Mount Kenya is the highest, surely. But the fact that the teacher says something like, Jen, that is very good, clap for him. Jen expects it and is likely to act better tomorrow. So it might not be directly conscious, but you see that element comes on the unconscious level. So Osanya, I would say that to your question, I think this operates on both levels, both the conscious and the unconscious. Osanya?
Yeah, I think I got it. I was thinking sometimes it's unconscious, but you work, and then you reach somewhere, your levels go down. Like maybe in a school, unasikia you are a new entrant, and then after some time, the teachers will say, maybe umekunywa uji wa hii shule. Maybe let's say kama ni Nangili, umekunywa uji ya Nangili. It means you have now gone back to the levels of those teachers. They came, wanakwambia, we were like that when we came. Utapoa tu.
I've seen that, Osanya, like as a teacher trainer, I've struggled to explain to teachers I train in the classrooms that keep on doing lesson plan schemes of work, and they remind me, those who are in the field, that they remind them that no, when we came, we were also doing those things. Let's give you 2 years and you no longer be doing those things. Othello?
Thank you, Daktari. I'm still waiting for you. I'm looking for where you place the factors of arrogance versus humility. In organizations, you talk about individual behaviors, and you earlier spoke about some organizations can collapse because of behavior of certain people. You find that there are people who are put in high positions, they have no track record of managing other people, managing their colleagues. And then they are placed in high positions, suddenly in an organization, and there is what I call flamboyance. This kind of characteristics display in those people, and they come with all the pomp and this flamboyance. You find in a very short while the department or the organizations is unraveling.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Harry.
Yeah, Othello, I really have no response, only to be able to say that, when you talk about arrogance vis-a-vis humility, the more knowledgeable we become, the more humble we should become. The more ability we discover we have, the more humble we should be. Sometimes, and most of the times, occasionally, arrogance is a result of what we saw some weeks earlier, that somebody is putting his feet in shoes that cannot fit him. But he's putting those feet in those shoes on the mere explanation that those shoes need somebody to put in his feet. Macho.
Thank you, sir. I was looking at the person job fit.
Yes.
Most cases, and I've experienced it where I work, somebody joins the organization, but you discover along the line, they are actually just there for the title and the salary at the end of the month. They really don't care in terms of putting in. And in the situation where we are in, until performance is reviewed at the end of the year, this person just does the bare minimum. And so then makes the team really, the other rest of the team really work hard. And so sometimes I think and going back to the issue of motivation, that some people would join an organization because I need a salary and I need to pay rent and I need to do all these things. But even minus passion, let's just say you're coming to push papers or work, even the basics of doing the basic that job requires is missing. And so the fit is not there. But because of the kind of environment that office is, it's very difficult to fire. It's easier to transfer, which means you're transferring one problem from one department to another, or from one ministry to another. And I find it very challenging within the government setup. Thanks.
All right. I think, Macho, what I can be able to say is that what we are trying to verbalize, and partly you have joined in that verbalization, is the challenge that is before management, not the employee. There is the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, that puts it that human beings are nasty, they are bad, they are brutish, he says by nature human beings are very bad. So if you are to buy Thomas Hobbes' argument, what he explained, the state of nature, the state where people are brutish, they're bad, they intend bad things, then you are joining the rest of us, Macho, in trying to say that there is a big, great challenge that lies at the feet of management. And perhaps that is why St. Paul would have warned us, let not many of us get into those positions, those higher positions. Because you see, the things you are describing, Macho, the things you are describing, you see, employees are there, to use the Kiswahili word,
they reach somewhere where they exist kupora, where, impress chasers. When can I write another impress? When can I have a chance to do an impressed? I have now, accounted for that impress. When am I writing another one? At no work done. There are people in organization who are always on impress, on nights out, night outs, and so forth. So the question is, when do they work for the salary they get? Because it seems that every week they have either this or that or that. So we are trying to say we reach a place whereby, as much as we are looking at those employees and frowning our faces, let a few of us ascend to the levels of management, because you can see the challenges of management. These challenges we are discussing, we are revealing that if we talk about motivation, the question is not that the employees are demotivated, but the question should be the reverse. What can management do to have the employees motivated? Or what has the management done or failed to do that has undermined motivation within the organization? Why is it that in the tenure of so and so as the MD, people really worked in the best interest of task performance for the organization? And in the tenure of so and so as the MD, people said, and you've heard them say, Macho, that I'm just in this thing because I have children with the fees to pay for. If I was not having children with the fees to pay for, I would not do it. And these things, you will feel them as a manager, you will feel them without these people saying, when they come before you, when you walk around the organizational whatever space, you will see people saying that without using words. So the question is, when you go back in your office as a manager, do you do something to have this one done differently? That's really the question we're talking about. Now, we've done quite a lot of that, and now let's make progress now to look at the nature and causes of individual difference. Really, we are reaching that tail end, the nature and causes of individual difference. So, when we talk about, yes, is somebody?
I had a follow-up. Yes, Dr. Yes.
Yes.
I had a follow-up question on what you were talking about, arrogance.
Yes.
But then I was just asking myself, you said when it's somebody.
Chris, we are missing you. I think your network might not be very stable.
Yeah, sure. My network is very unstable. I don't
Yeah,
know if you
struggling
can.
to get. Right.
Can you hear me?
Okay, it's on and off. Maybe you could put it in the chat, and then somebody.
Right, that's fine.
Good.
That's fine.
So we could put it in the chat. So we look at now the nature and the causes of individual differences. Now, we will define here, individual differences as those personal attributes that vary from one place to another, one person to another. Maybe this could be physical, could be psychological, personal attributes that will vary from one person to the other. So when we're talking about individual differences, we are now moving a rank higher, not just to look at individual behavior, but to try and now compare people and say, oh yeah, in this organization, we accept the fact that we have differing personal attributes. Some act this way, whereas others act differently. So we are trying to appreciate that within the organization, we have those things. These differences could come to us really both psychologically as well as physically. So we can talk about the physical differences, we can talk about the psychological differences. Now, talking about the psychological differences, which you remember from past learning, past slides, we've said psychological differences are learned characteristics, learned from home, society, educational institution, and so forth. You know, they are acquired by observing, acquired by practicing, acquired by learning from others and from the environment that somebody finds himself in or herself in. That's why we refer to them as learned characteristics, psychological differences, learned characteristics. Sometimes easier to be learned and very challenging to unlearn them. That's why actually one of the 21st century competencies, educational competencies, is learning to unlearn so that you can learn. One of the most critical competencies in the 21st century, really. Those who will succeed in organizations, those who will succeed, really have organizations that will succeed, that are those who will be able to get this competency. What competency? Learning to unlearn so that they can learn. Psychological differences. Very easy sometimes to learn because you can learn them through imitation, through copying, whatever it is. But sometimes when they have settled, they become very challenging to be unlearned. So they are acquired through those ways, observing, practicing, and so forth. Now, they include various examples like scene perception, values, personality, attitudes, motivation, and even the nature of learning. So these are psychological differences. So within that organization, we'll have people who are different, or rather behaviors of people that are different on the basis of their differences in perception. Remember, perception we are saying here, it results from different senses, like the way you feel, the way you hear, and so forth. Perception. How do you perceive this? No? Something of the feeling. So, although it is a learned characteristic, but you see, we are giving this example. It could be as a result of how you have been brought up. Maybe within certain challenging backgrounds as a child, that challenging environment you are brought up has produced this kind of perception in you. As you join the workplace, that organization, you carry those perceptions with you. You know, you could have been brought up in an environment that perhaps you suffered at the hands of your parents, whatever, maybe daddy, maybe mommy, or so forth. You get to this organization, and when you reach there, you discover the CEO is perhaps a woman, the CEO is a man. And when you look at this CEO man, when he gives task directives, you see this CEO in terms of that your father, that your mother, that your wife, that your husband, who caused you wrong, who explains, the negative situations, experiences you are in now. So you've developed that perception about somebody in terms of gender, how you feel, how you hear, and so forth. So you see, perceptions can explain psychological differences. Values, values influence perceptions that you have of a given situation. Values influence the decision-making processes. The values, very well put, learned sometimes and mostly from the home, from the family circles and the like. Talk about personality, explained as patterns of thinking and feeling. Patterns, the word to underline there is patterns, that when this happens, this is the way this person is likely to act and so forth. We'll be talking about this in a few slides to come. So patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of understanding, and patterns of behaving. Patterns is the word to emphasize here. Can also explain psychological differences. Talking about attitudes, the same. Attitudes could be positive, could be negative attitudes, like expressing one's thought and so forth. So you notice all these and many others related to it, personify before us the concept that employees within an organization can differ on the basis of their perceptions, their values, their personality, their attitudes. For those even who are teachers, the learners you teach in the classrooms can also differ on the basis of these things. Basis of perception, the basis of values, the basis of personality, attitudes, and so forth, motivation. The reasons why those learners may be performing poorly in that subject you are teaching, it may not totally be that you are a bad teacher. It may not totally be that there are no right books in the school. It could simply be the perception and the personality, whatever, the perception these learners have of you. So once we have mentioned all those, remember my clarion word. What do you do as a manager? What do you do as a teacher so that you can facilitate organizational success? That's really what we are concerned with. Now, looked at differently also, we are able to talk about also what we call physical differences. Physical differences explained now as those inherited characteristics. If you like, they are the gifted features in our lives. Very physical. You can see on that slide the examples we give. We are giving examples of physical elements. You have no control over them. Your body height, your weight, your body shape, appearance, complexion, and so forth. Some of those things, whereas some you may have some control over it, like things like religion or so forth. But many of those physical differences, you may not have a control over them. So we note, besides really what we are calling the psychological differences within the organization and the physical differences within that organization, the situation, the environment within an organization can also determine individual differences. So in a nutshell, what we are talking about here, you as a manager, successful management begins by appreciating that there'll be individual differences within the organization. So that individual differences really must make the manager's job to be endlessly challenging. That's what we've said a couple of minutes ago, endlessly challenging. Not to look at his individual differences in terms of those who behave this way must be sacked, but to look at them in terms of how do we harness these individual differences for the greatest benefit of the organization. So the employee's individual difference here is the hallmark of organizational management. What we mean here is that the fact that employees differ individually, it is the reason why organizational management exists. You see, if everything was to be naturally ordered to happen well within the organization, then there'll be no need for organizational management. You see, organizational management exists because employee individual differences exist within the organization. That's what we're saying. Management is not about seeking to limit diversity, but actually seeking to understand, accommodate employee diversity and individual difference. So as a manager, your role is not how to destroy diversity, but how to harness diversity and differences for the greatest benefit, not only of the organization, but also of those individual employees. So that brings us really to the end of our discussion on the whole idea of individual differences and individual behavior. Shortly, let's, Madiang, in a moment, I'll get to you in a moment. So let's now try to look at what occupational personality is. So behavior, one thing, and on the other hand, now we need to understand personality. Personalities, I look at it as something hidden within the individual employee. something intrinsically hidden within the individual employee. You see, individual behavior, you see it is manifested. People behave, people act, and through their action, they define their behavior. Personality, you see, is what is standing behind that behavior. Something we don't see, something that is not physically available to us, but very fundamental in explaining why people behave the way they behave. So when talking about occupational personality, we say, this is relatively an enduring pattern of thoughts, emotions, and behavior that define a person along really the psychological processes behind characteristics, such that when you look at these psychological processes, you're talking about the external traits, what you can be able to observe, and the internal states that you can't observe, but explains what you observe, e.g. the values they have and so forth. Now, there is some variability in this personality, whatever, manifestation in people. Now, how do we define this personality? How do we understand personality? Personality is actually about preferences. Personality is about what people prefer as related to their lifestyle, how they define happiness. Personality is about how this person defines happiness different from the other. For example, look at it in religious circles. Personality is about how somebody will say, to talk about martyrdom, to talk about suffering, grants that path hedonistically. How do I entertain suffering? So personality is about those deeper personal preferences that define how people derive happiness in their lifestyle. Personality predicts behavior patterns, as it were. Personality will predict the behavior patterns that we experience. So once more again, just like behavior, personality is a product of both nature as well as nurture. So I can't repeat these elements again. You understand? Nature really, by birth. This is an argument that would argue that people have that personality, that disposition, because of what they have inherited by birth. Nurture would be that people have that personality because of how they have been brought up. For example, in terms of socialization, their life experiences, and so forth. So, those two forces, nature and nurture, help us to understand what really personality is. Now, there are various models of personality, various ways of understanding personality. One of these ways is what we call the 5-factor model of personality. Now, what we are getting into at this tail end of the discussion is, how do we understand personality? Remember, personality is that force, that intrinsic force within a person that helps us to understand behavior, what you observe. Behavior is what we observe. Now, what stands behind that behavior at the heart, at the intrinsic heart of the individual, is what we're talking about personality, you see? So one of these models that helps us to explain what personality is what we call the 5-factor model of personality. So 5-factor model is simply a hierarchical organization of personality traits in terms of 5 elements. So we talk about people, or rather personalities that are conscientious, conscientiousness, personalities that are agreeable, people who manifest what we can describe as agreeableness. People who manifest a personality that we can call neuroticism. People who manifest, a personality that we can call an openness to experience. and the people who manifest really what we refer to as extraversion or extroverts, if you like. So generally, to understand this, if I may use this particular slide can help us to see the emphasis that is in each of these. So you see that 5-factor personality model: Kano, consciousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion. You can see where the emphasis is. You know, personality helps us to describe internal forces, intrinsic forces within the individual in that organization that produces this behavior. As a manager, you don't need to be an MD. You know, manager, even if it is you are a mason due to a head of department, whatever it is, as a manager, you will manage people more correctly if you understand, you know, their personality. Their personality characterizes some of their best points, how they define happiness. For example, the conscientiousness people are a more careful people, more dependable people, and so forth. But let's just look maybe in a detail at each of these instead of summarizing it there. We're talking about conscientiousness people, you know, personality models. The first model, the 5-factor personality, that you can look at employees within your organization and group them along these 5 elements, 5 groups. One of the groups you can group employees within the organization is what we refer to as the conscientiousness personality, people of conscientiousness personality. It includes people with high levels of thoughtfulness, very good impulse control, and goal-directed behaviors. Now, this is a group of people that appear to be more organized and more structured in their approach, you know? So you see, not always the case, but you'll find such people, you know, working in a scientific, you know, areas, you know, things that, you know, are more attuned to detail, You know, I would imagine somebody like, you know, a surgeon and so forth. So you want to hire, now that everybody, you know, is studying for everything, whatever it is, you want to hire a surgeon in your hospital, you know, as the MD. When you are interviewing people, when you are asking the question away from their certificate that they studied medicine and really they have worked in so many hospitals, is this one of the personalities you'll be looking for in the people you are employing? So you can see the strength of that kind of personality group. And you can also see the low points, I mean, rather, if you like, the opposites of people who are not conscientious, because you look at each personality in terms of, if somebody is like this, he tends to act this way. And if he's the opposite, he will tend to act this. So those who are not conscientiousness personality, they will tend to dislike structure. You know, you have those people in the organization. They dislike structure. They dislike schedules. You know, they prefer to procrastinate on important tasks, and they fail to complete even tasks as well. So looked at it, people with this personality can become great motivational components of personality, so that people who are conscientiousness, you know, they have what I can call internal motivation than external motivation. Note that we can observe this is the strongest personality predictor of performance, because these are people who are self-driven. They are not people who wait to be told. There are people who are self-driven. The second category in the 5-factor model is what we call people who are agreeable. These people will show signs of trust, signs of kindness, signs of affection. They tend to have very high prosocial behaviors, which means that they are more inclined to be helping people. People who share, who are comforting, who are cooperative, empathetic towards others, and so forth. So again, if you are working in HR department of an organization, where do you place such people? These people are likely to be more effective in jobs that require cooperation and helpfulness. So could it be that you are hiring nurses in that organization? You have a clinic and you're hiring nurses. So who are you looking for? Not just papers, but you are looking for personalities that depict this agreeableness. Having said that, we look at the next group of people, the neuroticism, neuroticism. Now, this is apparently a personality that manifests very negative characteristics, as it were, manifesting itself in terms of, occasional sadness, moodiness, and emotional instability. So many people in organization may confuse such people as being antisocial. No. This is simply something within the personality. Some people might think that they are simply antisocial, and that's why sometimes they are described by that word neuroticism. Neuroticism. So it is a form of a personality. So such people tend to experience, mood swings, anxiety, irritability, experience sudden changes in character, and so forth. So again, such people within the organization, you need to understand them and be able to see where they lie. The next category is people we describe with a personality group of openness. These are people who include, imagination. They include a high sense of insight. They are eager to learn and experience new things. You'll see them in organization. In those schools, you'll see them. In the classrooms, you'll see them. So when you have people with this character, or rather this personality will naturally lead to having a broad range of interests and being more adventurous when it comes to decision making. So the question is, where do you place such people? People who have a high sense of creativity, a high sense of adaptability. Where do you place them within the organization? Finally, we talk about the extroverts. The term extroverts is also used in the next test, the Myers-Briggs personality test. So the extraversion. So these are really people, we need not to explain more here, people who are outgoing. They generally get energized more when they are in company of many. Their thinking is at its best when they are in company of many. So you see, they'll be manifested in terms of characters like being talkative, assertive, high amounts of emotional expressiveness, and so forth. So again, you see, like these people thrive, they are at their best when they are in situations where they are recognized. They want to become centers of attention in groups. So if you are a manager in an organization, where do you place such people? Like you are in a school, you are a principal. The parents are coming by. They are annoyed with certain things, with the performance in Form 4 results and so forth. Get the extroverted people to be the guest speakers, or get the extroverted people, teachers, to talk to the parents, you see? So you see, for example, in an organization, you work in a bank, you want to have a group of people to send out to sell the products of the bank, products of the bank. You work for Safaricom, you've come up with the new products. You want to market those products. You just pick up people anyhow because these are Form 4 leavers or university graduates. I say because they are young people, they can be versatile, talk to people. No, look at also the personality. If you get the extroverted people, they are like to do better sales, better management performance, and so forth. So this group of personality describes something of the social interaction and persuasion. The opposite, obviously, is what we call the introverted people. Finally, we talk about what we call the Myers-Briggs type indicator, as developed by Briggs-Myers in 1962. Now, this particular one is very critical at explaining, different, personality types in an organization. Now, Myers-Briggs presented this personality type indicator to help us understand how various people behave differently within the organization. Generally, it consists of 4 dichotomous scales. Dichotomous scale in the sense that it presents a personality type and presents its opposite. That's why you see the 4 dichotomous scales. The first one, the introvert vis-a-vis the extrovert. The thinking vis-a-vis the feeling, the sensing vis-a-vis the intuition, the judging vis-a-vis the perception, with those acronyms. Now, to understand this better, just look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Now, I will run through this. These are a little bit, smaller letters, but I'll try to run through it. It's more or less this our last slide, as it were. So we are talking about the Myers-Briggs type indicator. What is at the heart of it is that to understand the personality types within your organization in terms of their preferences. Now you see, on the first side, the EI, the extroverts and the introverts. Now you can see the leading thing is that you ask yourself as a manager. In fact, the idea should not be you as a manager asking to understand the people, but helping people to understand themselves even in your presence. So you ask 4 fundamental questions. The first question you ask in the Myers-Briggs, and as I ask the question, reflect on it personally in your own life. For example, are you outwardly or inwardly focused? That's the question you ask. And then to help you answer this question, you say, if you could be described as talkative, outgoing, if you could be described like, as if you are fast-paced, you like to be in a fast-paced environment, if you tend to work out ideas with others and so forth, then you are an extrovert. Now, if you are that opposite, then you are an introvert. For example, if you could be described as reserved, private, and so forth. So you go on asking that question. The second question you see, you ask yourself, how do you prefer to take information? If you focus on the reality of how things are, if you pay attention to concrete facts and details, if you prefer ideas that have practical applications and so forth, then you explain your inclination. You now say there, then you are a sensor. The noun there is that you are a sensor. Now, if you are, if you imagine the possibility of how things could be, you are not focused on reality of how things are, But when you consider something, when you are in a school, you are this person who will always say, no, I wish the head teacher would be like this. I wish the classrooms would be like this. I wish the government would have done this. And then you are an intuitive person. But if you focus on reality of how things are, that the challenges of CBC are like this, so we should do like this. You pay attention to concrete facts and details, that we don't have CBC books in schools, but we can improvise this, and then you are a censor. You understand that? On the third level, you ask yourself a question. How do you prefer to make decisions? Now, if you make decisions in the impersonal way, using logical reasoning, irrespective of saying, is he a child of my aunt or so forth? If you value justice and fairness, if you enjoy finding the flaws in an argument, you look at an argument and you ask yourself, what are the flaws in this argument? No? And then you are a thinker. So T for a thinker. Conversely, when you ask your question, how do you prefer to make decisions? How do you normally decide? So if you make decisions basing your decision on personal values, how your actions affect others. You see now here, you are not impersonal, but you are basing it, looking at yourself, how do you affect others? You know, if you are the kind of person who prides value, or you value harmony, you value forgiveness, you like to please others and point out the best in people, rather than looking at flaws in arguments. You know, if you are the kind of person who can be described as warm and empathetic, then you are a failure. F for a failure. So a thinkers and a failures, you know, censors and people who are, intuition. Finally, the fourth question you ask yourself, how do you prefer to live your outer life? Now, if you prefer to have matters settled, you have issues, you prefer matters settled. You think rules and, you think deadlines should be respected. You prefer to have detailed step-by-step instructions, make plans, want to know what you are getting into. And then you are a judger, you are a judging personality. The opposite of this, you answer the question by saying, how do you prefer to live your outer life? Now, if you are the kind of a person who prefer to leave your options open, so the opposite of have your matters settled once and for all, you are actually the kind of person saying, no, time will tell. If you see rules and deadlines as flexible, you can say the deadline for doing this should be this, but you can always be flexible. If you like to improvise and make things up as you go, if you really interrogate yourself and you find that you are spontaneous, you enjoy surprises and new situations, then you are a perceiver. Now, on a nutshell, dear friends, you now see those descriptions that we've given for each of these four questions, that is the E, I, S, N, T, F, J, P. Now, you don't find people, according to Myers-Briggs, in life who are simply extroverted or introverted. You don't find people who are simply sensors. They are simply sensors only, or people who are just intuitors only, or people who are thinkers or failures only. Rather, these four questions producing 8 descriptions together, they combine themselves in unique way. For example, look at the first personality, the first of Myers-Briggs personality, the I, the S, the T, and the J. You see, picking one letter after every question, that people who are really introverted, they are sensors, they are thinkers, and they prefer judging. Now, that now forms a personality. And now you get a description of that person. Is a person who is responsible, sincere, analytic, reserved, realistic, systematic, hardworking, trustworthy, with a sound practical judgment within an organization. So you can see now how the things are operated. So you don't begin by judging your personality type. You begin by answering this side question that are you outward or inwardly focused? Do you prefer to take in information? How do you prefer to make decisions? How do you prefer to live your outer life as you pick one letter? So after you pick a letter in each of these, then you combine those letters together and they explain your personality. So you can see there are those various explanations. The idealistic people, the whatever. So these elements are producing descriptions for various personalities. So you see, dear friends, I want to conclude by saying that personality is about God-given abilities, things that we grow within, our environments when we interact and so forth. They're about the marks, the scars of this life, where we've traveled, where we are. Personality is about marks of where we are going to. There is no personality, like if you look at Myers-Briggs, there is no personality that is negative. There is no personality that you can say this is a bad one. All we are saying is the various personalities within an organization can be able to help us determine what kind of people we want to bring into that organization. Every organization has various facets, various areas. Now, if you want to hire people within that organization, you look at these various people, various things. If you are asked to preside over an interview in an organization, these are the things to look for. Don't spend the important time of the interview time looking at certificates. Now, everybody has a certificate. There are objective realities, but ask questions that will help you judge whether this candidate is an introvert or extrovert, whether he's a sensor or a intuitor, whether he's a thinker or a feeler, whether he's somebody preferring judgment or is a perceiver. Then combine these things and ask yourself, the person you want in this organization to do this, what personality do you want? And you arrive at the best person. I want to end this presentation really by by putting this assignment before you, which I think it has also been loaded in week 4 of 6 of our course. Now, this is supposed to be an assignment that helps us summarize as it were, the 4 topics we've covered so far. So in this assignment, as you will also read it on the learning platform, is there repeated like this. I say, so far you've studied the nature of organizations. You've also studied the nature of organizational behavior and organizational environment. You further appreciate the critical aspect that individual behavior plays in the overall organizational success. Now, for your assignment, I'm asking you find time to listen to this 1-hour video on how individual personality and behavior affects the well-being of an organization. So if you click on that link, you'll be able, or if you paste that link in a search engine, you'll be able to see that video. Now, having listened and watched that video, I say now, imagine that you are in charge of the human resource division of your organization. This organization could be an education organization, maybe you are a teacher, could be an NGO, could be banking, could be engineering, whatever it is, the organization. And it was required of you to hire exactly 5 new core employees What I mean by core employees, perhaps you want in a school, maybe some employees, 5 core, whatever you understand to be core, 5 new core employees. The question is, determine what would be the spread of these employees based on Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. So if you look at the Myers-Briggs personality indicator, for example, you see those reality. Do you want to say maybe 2 should be of ISTJ or 1 should be INPF and why? That's the question. So we're saying that here, determine what would be the spread of these employees based on Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, giving reasons based on the type of organization. For example, you are able to say, this is a school, we want to hire teachers on the board of management, and we are having a problem with the discipline in Form 2. So we are looking for this kind of personality of a teacher because of this. You work in an organization, in a bank, you want to say, we are having challenges with our products. We want somebody who will be able to do ABCD, therefore this is the kind of person we are looking for. So giving reasons based on the type of organization, its requirements, and why you think each choice is critical to your organizational success. What we mean by this, we are saying why you think, for example, you need 2 of ESTP, or you need only 1 of ISTP and 3 of this, because your organization needs that particular element. Now, this assignment is supposed to help you bring together the wealth of information that we have covered so far in terms of understanding organizations, organizational behavior, organizational environment, individual differences, individual behavior, and where the organization wants to go. I'm saying your individual written paper should be between 4 to 7 pages in APA 7th edition. So this paper I've indicated, you will read all this on the learning platform. I've even indicated when you are saying that I would like to emphasize, dear students, is that in the last assignment we had, the end of semester assignment last year, many of us simply downloaded from the AI engines and presented really assignments as such. That time, we may have really exercised a lot of understanding. I noticed that some of our papers had very high percentage plagiarized, whatever rates, but this time as you work, that's why I'm of us academically. Having said this, I want us to really end here by saying that when all is said and done, really what we're talking about in personality, we are talking about being able to find the best positions that can be able to help our organizations. We are trying to say we must be able to find the best person to be able to push the people within those organizations to a greater level. I end by saying this. If you want to understand the importance of employees' ability, employees' personality, and employees' motivation to the organization, we can be able to give this analogy, and you'll find it in the video that I presented, that it's about where the organization wants to go. You can compare it to a vehicle, so that the size of the engine of a vehicle could represent the ability of your employees. The make of that vehicle could represent the personality of your employees, whereas where you want to go, where that vehicle must go, indicates the motivation that your employees have.
I would like to end here unless there is one or two with observations. Otherwise, I would like to end here. An observation? I hope not. Let us pray. We thank you, God, that you've given us the intellectual stamina and an understanding that we exist in the organizations we find ourselves in as salt in those organizations. We thank you because you helped us understand that our unique personalities, our unique behavior are elements that should add color, should add the advantage of the organization. Help each one of us as employees in our organization, as future managers and present managers in the organization, to develop practical skills in management that will be able to move our organizations forward. We ask this through Christ our Lord. So
Amen.
members,
Amen.
Amen. Thank
for
you.
now
Thank you.
and
Good night.
reflect on those things